Good Monday morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Podcast Daily. I am Jeremy Birmingham. It is September the 19th. Ohio State is 3-0. Bill Landis and myself are once again breaking down what we learned, what we saw, what we gathered as we rewatched the Ohio State game from Saturday night. The Buckeyes 77-21 over Toledo. And Bill, I'll let you have the floor first. We talked about it a lot post-game on Snap Judgments, but it felt like it was about as good a game as the offense could have possibly put together. And when you rewatch it, for me anyway, I don't think I have any disagreement with that.
Yeah, I came into this last week not having much to say about the defense, and I feel like I come into it this week feeling the same way about the offense. It was just clinical. Like, I don't even know what you'd nitpick. CJ, I guess maybe shouldn't try to force that ball to Kate Stover that was almost picked off, but that's really about it, because it was about as clean, I think, as an offensive game plan can be. And one of the things I liked the most about it was that even we've talked a lot about the run game, even when it wasn't particularly well blocked, and not every run play is, it still felt to me like they got something out of it more often than not. I don't think they had any negative runs when the first team offense was in there. I think the first one came after the backups came in late in the game. There might have been one or two runs for no game, but I don't think there were any that got dropped behind the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Trayvon Henderson's first run of the day was for 1 yard loss or no gain, but that was, I think, it.
Yeah, maybe I'm misremembering. Yeah, but if that was behind the line, then that was the only one, because I don't think mine had a negative run, and Dallin did not have one, I don't think, until the second string was in. So I thought it was good. I was actually on the rewatch pretty impressed with the offensive line. I thought as a group they had a really good day. And DeJuan Jones in particular stuck out to me as somebody who played well. He buried a couple guys on a few run plays, was good in pass protection. Probably the best game he's had this year, and I think maybe to this point he's been a tad bit inconsistent. So I thought that was good to see too.
Well, I'll start there because you sort of walked me right to it. My first notes were: screw the inside run, use the athletes that you have on the offensive line and run to the edge, because that the tackle group, the pairing of Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones was absolutely dominant in the, getting to the edge and getting Ohio State's running backs to outside. And again, maybe it's only because they're only really tried the between tackle stuff inside of the 5 yard line, and it's coming down there, and maybe it's easier to stuff it. But I just don't see the point in doing it. If the running backs are comfortable getting outside, and they seem to be, the Buckeyes were averaging almost 7 yards a carry, just getting the ball, on the edges and letting the guys just sort of use their athleticism. And so at this point, obviously you're going to need to get that 1 or 2 yards at some point, but I think maybe the more you put it on film that, hey, we're going to just run to the outside, we're going to do perimeter stuff, the more it opens up the inside run, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you take what they're giving you, right? I think I've been charting every run play through the first 3 games, and this is more anecdotal, I guess, just from watching it and trying to rack my brain for it. But I feel like their most successful running plays have been just running like wide zone, and particularly running wide zone into the boundary has been really good for them. The short side of the field, and the jet sweeps when they get the ball to Emeka Egbuka have been really good. And then they have this, it's a newer thing for them, I think. Justin Fry and did it at UCLA last year, and a lot of NFL teams do it. It's like sort of a counter that builds off of their interior run game. I think people call it like wind back, where it's like you take counter steps and then the receiver comes back across the formation and kind of works as a lead blocker. They've only done it a couple times, but I think they've probably averaged, I want to say, like 7 or 8 yards per carry off of that play too, and that's an outside hitting play as well. So I'm with you. I guess you want to see them, when the money's down, be able to run the ball inside and get those yards and get that knockback. But as long as the ball is getting in the end zone at the end of the drive, I know it's frustrating maybe to see Ohio State run 3 times for 1 yard to score a touchdown, but as long as they score, I'm not going to quibble with it too much. But in the meantime, I think hitting those outside perimeter running plays are going to be really successful for them, and probably what they should start to hang their hat on.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to ask you about, is more of the X's and O's guy, especially with the offensive line. Do you see a fundamental shift in what the offensive line is doing in their blocking schemes? Is this more of that old like Denver Broncos zone blocking type of scheme where as opposed to just hat on a hat like Ohio State's traditionally done?
Yeah, I think so. And it did some of that in 2019 too. I think it's probably Ryan Day's preference. I just don't think they were very good at it the last 2 years, or last year especially. But 2019 they were great at it when they had JK, and they ran wide zone all day, and JK would run for 200 yards a game, and they had really athletic guards who got a lot of movement. And I think you're seeing something similar with this team. I don't know, maybe. I don't know if the trio of Donovan Jackson, Matt Jones, and Luke Whippler is as athletic as Wyatt Davis, Josh Myers, and Jonah Jackson, sort of on the whole. But it's still a pretty athletic group, and I think you can get some of that. And it's the tackles more than anything. I think, especially a guy like DeJuan Jones, who's just so big. And I think if you're asking him to kind of get vertical knockback all the time, he's going to struggle with leverage from time to time. But if you can get him moving laterally and just kind of take that side of the line with him, which I think we saw happen a few times on Saturday, I think that's probably more comfortable for those guys.
He just collapses the line when they run that sort of that sweep and that edge stuff. And I'm like, man, that seems to me like the way to go. I also had on here that Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones played a great game. Pass pro, like clean all night, is about as good as it could possibly get. And I know that people are going to look at it and scoff and say, oh, it's Toledo, but that Toledo defensive line is pretty good. And you're going to see them be one of the better defensive lines in the country throughout the year. And maybe that's because they're in the MAC, who knows, but they certainly weren't small. It wasn't like an undersized defensive line that maybe you'd expect to see from a MAC school. But the way that Ohio State kept the pocket clean for CJ Stroud was unbelievable all night. And it brings me to the other point I had really on Stroud. Last week, I was sort of not jokingly saying he had no business throwing the ball to Marvin Harrison. I sort of meant it. The one down the sideline in that little hole that he hit on the long ball to Marvin against Arkansas State. And post game, CJ said, I was throwing it where only Marvin can get it. And I was rewatching this game from that vantage point of how many of these balls that CJ threw where you're like, man, he should not throw that pass, did he throw in a spot where no one else was going to get it but his guy? And that sort of ball placement is something that to me separates him from Justin Fields, from Dwayne Haskins, the ability to put it exactly where he wants it. I don't know that I've ever seen a better Ohio State quarterback doing that.
It's pretty special. And it happens even on plays where maybe you don't even realize it. Like if you even go back to the Notre Dame game, the first touchdown to Emeka Egbuka, like that's an outbreaking route that maybe feels kind of safe on the surface. But if you watch it from the right angle, like that ball was in a perfect position, exactly where it had to be, away from two defenders, away from Emeka's body, in a place where he could catch it and then keep running up the sideline. That's the other thing about CJ is that, he is, really good at putting the ball where only his guys can get to it. But I think he's also really good at putting the ball in places where they can catch it and then continue to do something with it. He's not just putting it on their body where they have to fully stop and then restart their momentum again and try to get something after the catch. So yeah, I mean, it's the one, Julian's first touchdown, like on the sideline when he was rolling out, and there's 3-4 defenders pretty close to Julian, and he sort of just like throws it on a line, like hovering over the sideline, and then Julian just kind of sticks his hands over the sideline and catches it. Like you can't do it any better than that. So, and there's plenty of other throws like that too.
Yeah, I have a theory that ball was actually for Marvin. And Julian,
oh, really?
And Julian jumped in front of it. If you go back to that play specifically, you'll see as CJ is running towards the sideline, there's a moment where Marvin Harrison's about middle point of the end zone when he realizes what's happening, and he turns on the jets and sprints to the corner and was right behind Fleming when Julian jumped in front of it and put his hands in the ball. I think it was for Marvin, but I guess we can ask CJ about that this week.
We can. Yep.
There was that throw. That was one. And I'm like, man, that ball is thrown so perfectly. But the two that I really had to rewatch to understand and appreciate how good they were was the seam shot to Cade Stover. I was directly in front of Cade Stover when he caught that ball, so I didn't get to see the placement of the 3 defenders that were encompassing him on that throw. And for CJ to put that just on a dime, I mean, right down the seam, in stride, just absolutely gorgeous. And then the other one, with 5 minutes to go in the first quarter, he dropped the ball over a leaping defender to Marvin Harrison that Marvin thought he scored on, but he got, stepped out of bounds at the 3. And like you watch it and you could be convinced rewatching it that the ball was going to be intercepted. Mm-hmm. And it was just it was like the throw, when we're at practice and Ryan Day has the nets up and they do that 1-inch throw, right? So they have for the uninitiated, the Buckeyes put up giant, basically L screens for baseball reference, pitcher screens. And the goal is to throw it 1 inch over the top of that bar. And in an effort to emulate what it's like to drop the ball in behind linebackers in front of safeties. And he did exactly that on that play. And it was absolutely stunning to rewatch it.
He did, and I would also put the touchdown pass on the end line to Marvin in that category too, because that's kind of what that drill is meant for. And the thing I always think of when I think of that drill is all the way back to 2017 when Ohio State came back to beat Penn State in the shoe, and the last touchdown that JT Barrett threw the Marcus Ball. Like when Ryan Day now talks about the 1-inch drill, like that's his teach tape. Like he shows that play. And the ball to Marvin in the back of the end zone against Toledo, I thought was similar. There are a couple of defenders like on the goal line. So CJ had to top shelf it a little bit, and Marvin had to go full extension for it. But that's, you expect your receiver to make your play in that position. That's where that ball is supposed to be. The sideline one, I wonder about that throw. Is it like, did he just get lucky, or did he know like where exactly that ball needed to be to miss that leaping defender? Because it missed his fingers by like a matter of inches. Like it was so close, but then it just sort of drops into Marvin's arms and he starts running, and you don't think about it again. But I guess I'll give CJ the benefit of the doubt and say that he meant to do that.
The thing with quarterbacks sometimes, because they have such a confident aura about them, that you don't know all the time if they're just being a gunslinger and going out there and trying to do stuff that they're like, hey, maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I will. I'll try it. But at some point, when you have so much success doing it over and over and over, and you don't ever pay the price for it, why not? That's the sort of thing, I guess. He certainly had it. On my notes, because I do take this seriously, folks. And on Saturday night, I felt bad. Right here. I felt bad on Saturday night. I was like, oh, I need to rewatch this part. I need to rewatch this play. If I have to nitpick one play of the day for CJ Stroud, it is the touchdown to Marvin Harrison in the back of the end zone, because he had Mayan Williams absolutely wide open in the flat for a touchdown. And it's one of those moments where I wonder if sometimes the degree of difficulty that CJ takes is not always necessary, because Mayan Williams was wide open in the flat for a much, much easier touchdown.
I think he also might have had someone open too on the first touchdown to Marvin on the corner out in the back of the end zone, but he was locked on to Marvin the whole time. And he's done that at times. It does feel like he locks on to Marvin or Emeka, depending on the design of the play. To this point, the ball's gotten there, so I'm not going to criticize it too much. But sometimes I am wondering, like, are you challenging yourself? Like, are you doing this on purpose? Like, and I guess, like, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't do that. So I don't want to accuse him of doing that, but it does feel that way sometimes, where it's just like, man, that guy's wide open. Like, just look to your right. He's right there. He's wide open. But no, you're going to rip this ball down the seam over 3 defenders' heads in the perfect spot it needs to be, just to prove that you can do it. But I guess as long as he keeps doing it, then more power to him.
I think it actually says something about CJ's willingness to adapt to the game plan, because one of my biggest concerns about CJ heading into the season was whether or not he was going to be too locked on to Jackson Smith and Jigba all the time, and not allow himself to look at other guys. But now it seems like he just sort of, I don't know if it's on a per play basis or per drive basis, or he's now looks pretty damn comfortable throwing the ball to any one of those guys. And then when you couple that with getting back Julian Fleming, who, heading into this season, I thought Julian could have been a guy to have a really big year, just because you can't cover all of them. And Julian, because of his physicality, because he's going to be out there in a lot of the run situations, because he's so good at that's one of the areas I think that is just, the kid doesn't get enough credit for it. People have been down on Julian Fleming because he's been injured and had some bad luck over the last couple of years. But if you talk about a kid that really has like deep dived into the art of playing wide receiver, because he did not play wide receiver in the traditional sense in high school. He was a kid that played in basically a wing T offense. And when they did throw it, it was Julian, go get it, just jump balls. It's the old Denard Robinson, Michigan offense. Like, okay, now we'll just throw it up and hope someone catches it. And more often than not, he would. But man, he is a really, really devastating run blocker. And I think that's where you start to see a kid carve out a niche in an offense that is saying, hey, how do you get him on the field? What is his role? And he seems to be embracing that tough guy. Like, I'm going to go out there. I don't care how hurt I am. I'm just going to go out there and do it. And I really don't think anyone anticipated that out of Julian Fleming when he came to high school or came to college as the number one ranked player in the country, number one ranked receiver in the country.
He caught a ball on a slant, if I'm not mistaken, where I thought you could see that he had worked on his route running, and it's probably still a work in progress for him for all the reasons that you stated. But if he can do a little bit of that, maybe a little bit of the go ball stuff, and then the block, I love the blocking. I mentioned the runs to the boundary earlier, and there was one in the game that's sticking out of my head where he was in a tighter split, but still kind of removed from the line of scrimmage. Then CJ motioned him in tighter, and he was basically lined up as a tight end, but he was just standing up.
Yeah.
And then he and DeWan sealed off the right side, and I think it was Mayan who kind of ran around them. I think it was 19 yards for the cleanest looking wide zone run you'll ever see. He was untouched. He just ran out of real estate. He just kind of ran out of bounds. But Julian had a really strong sort of seal block there, and I think he can give that to them. They asked that of their receivers. They've asked that of Emeka quite a few times. They've even asked it of Xavier Johnson. But if he's healthy, and hopefully he can be moving forward, I think Julian's the guy that I'd want in that position more often than not, because he's so good at it.
Yeah, and going back to that wide run stuff we were talking about earlier, I think that's one of the understated parts of that opportunity for Ohio State. And it's not just Julian or Marv or Emeka or Xavier Johnson. It is the combination of Cade Stover and Mitch Rossi out there. Those two are walling off defenders, and it changes the offense. And it sort of underscores why Ryan Day prefers to go in a 12 personnel look as his base. Obviously Buckeyes fans want to see wide open, high flying offenses, but I think what Ohio State's showing is that you can still have a fullback and a tight end on the field and score 77 points. That's pretty wild. I mean, they had a tight end and fullback on the field for, I didn't chart the plays. That's your job, nerd. But I think it was probably 80% of the time they got both of those guys out there. And to still score 77 points and have 763 total yards of offense out of 12 personnel pretty much the entire game is crazy.
I don't know how many snaps total they played with 12 personnel, but I can tell you that they lined up in pistol or under center on more than half their plays. And usually when they're doing that, there's two tight ends on the field, and that doesn't account for the few times they did it out of shotgun too. So I think it was probably somewhere around 65-70% of two tight ends on the field. Sometimes there were three tight ends. Sometimes there were four tight ends if you want to count Mitch Rossi as a tight end when he's lined up in the backfield. So I do think they're embracing that. I like it. I know I wrote a story in the spring about why do we talk about the tight end so much about Ohio State that Kevin Wilson didn't like very much. But my point in writing that story was that we talk about them so much when they don't really utilize the position. But if they're going to utilize the position the way they have through these three games, I'm happy to talk about them because I think it's fun. I think it's a good way to get creative. It's a good way to create mismatches. And when you have a guy like Cade Stover, who's proven to be the receiving threat that he has to this point, and G. Scott, who clearly is a receiving threat and is coming along in the blocking area, I think that makes your offense, all the more deadly. But they're going to be able to line up with four receivers and throw it all around the yard, basically whenever they want. But if they can get these bigger personnel packages on the field and still be able to threaten teams with the run and the pass, I don't know how you defend it. And that's what their offense was kind of like that in 19 when they had Justin at quarterback. But this is, and CJ and Justin aren't the same player. But
what are you talking about? CJ had a two carries for 9 yards on Saturday night, including a first down.
He did. That was a really good keep, by the way. He made the right decision on that play. But I think this offense could be a maybe more fully realized version of what they were trying to do in 19, just because CJ is so much more mature than Justin was back then when he was still, trying to figure out the offense as a first-time starter.
We could keep talking about this offense. They certainly deserve it. They went out there and put on an absolute clinic. Couple extra thoughts for me on offense. I'm still trying to figure out where and how Trayvon Henderson got hurt, because
no idea.
He certainly looked healthy on that first drive, ran the ball pretty hard, scored the touchdown, and then didn't come back. And so that was a little puzzling, even on the rewatch. I'm like, hey, I don't know where that happened. Post game, there was a picture floating around the internet of him in a boot after the game. Luke Whippler was in a boot after the Notre Dame game, didn't appear to do anything. Trayvon did post on Twitter, "I'll be back soon." It's just always one of those cryptic things. You don't know if it's nothing or if it's a little something. And especially because the Ohio State injury report right now, availability report means nothing. We're guessing at this point. It's still only Monday. We'll try to glean more information on that. And, offensively, the only other thing I really have, or two things, it looked like Jackson Smith-Njigba tweaked the hamstring that has been bothering him on his second catch. He had that diving catch on the sideline in the second quarter. Came off the field immediately after that play and did not go back in. And as I'm on the field, this, I guess, one of those moments where me being on the field helps because I see things that we don't see on the rewatch. He was stretching his leg pretty good and trying to loosen it up again. It's one of those catch-22s, I guess, where you're like, hey, you want to get him some reps against Toledo. You want to knock the rust off. But at the same time, if there's any fear of re-aggravation of an injury, then all of a sudden it could linger and linger. But that brings to me my final point on offense, Bill, because, again, I'm really excited about what we saw in the offense. Jayden Ballard on the 62-yard touchdown or 72-yard touchdown, whatever it was, it looked like somebody was holding down R2 because I don't think I've seen an Ohio State receiver run that fast since Ted Ginn Jr. against Michigan in 2004 on a punt return down the other sideline. That was crazy how fast he was. It looked like he was shot out of a freaking cannon.
Yeah, that was really impressive because I thought like he would have caught it and then the play would have been over because that defender was right there. And then it took about a step and a half before Jayden like created 3 yards of separation, 3 or 4 yards separation, and then he put about 6 to 8 more yards between him and the defender before he got to the end zone. Like it was pretty unbelievable. Like we expected that from him though, right? That's kind of his calling card. But I thought, that was a big play, like a splash play. But he had a couple of receptions from Kyle McCord on like out breaking routes. There were good throws from McCord, but also nice to see from Jayden, who maybe similar to Julian, we just kind of peg as a straight down the field go ball kind of guy. And it was nice to see a little more of the route tree, I guess, for a guy like that too.
Yeah. Jayden Ballard, to use, football parlance, is a super twitched up athlete, like unusually athletic. And he doesn't really, if he walked by you, you wouldn't really get it. But boy, oh boy, he has an extra year. And we saw that for the first time in his Buckeyes career on Saturday night against Toledo. And I just can't imagine it's the last, because not only did he do it on that play, as you mentioned, he showed he could catch the ball in tougher situations. Last year, we had multiple opportunities when him and Kyle McCord were out there together, and it seemed like they were always just a inch or two off. And Jayden, we saw him like at Nebraska a couple of times, just making like leaping efforts to catch the ball. Anyway, I think that he's a guy that you have to find a way, especially if Jackson Smith-Njigba continues to be less than 100%.
They had him, I think they let him return a punt too, if I'm not mistaken, or a kickoff or something. And I wonder too if he can maybe help him there too. I don't know. I guess they're okay there at the moment, but if they want to mix in some other guys, maybe that's the way to get the ball in Jayden's hands as well. What did you, before we move off the offense, what did you think of McCord?
I mean, I liked the opportunity to see him run the offense in a bit more of a normal setting. I think sometimes because we assume or expect that every quarterback can throw the football, you don't appreciate how challenging those long outs are to the other hash. Like those are big time throws that Kyle McCord made. And, I think that even the touchdown to Ballard, it's a play where he showed some play recognition, because he saw immediately that it was broken. And as Kevin Wilson talked about on Saturday night, that was supposed to be basically a courtesy touch for G. Scott. That was not, they weren't trying to score there. But it was so wide open that Kyle had to do it. And it takes me back to a week ago when we talked on the show where Arkansas State forgot to cover Xavier Johnson when Kyle McCord was in the game, and Kyle rushed the throw and he didn't make it quite as clean. And so Xavier had to basically take it to the ground to catch it. So to me, that's just that little escalation in his awareness and the ability to then make the play.
Yeah, he seemed calmer. And like he was seeing things a little better. And maybe that's just, he knew maybe he had more time in this game than he had against Arkansas State when he got in there kind of later, probably than he was expecting to. He had a chance to throw a touchdown. I think might have been on the drive where Dallin Hayden scored. kind of like a rollout, and he just kind of left the ball short or was like a little inaccurate. So maybe I'd like to see him be a little better on a throw like that because they're so important to the offense. But I thought converting on a couple of third downs with those kind of outbreaking far hash to sideline throws was nice to see for him.
Yeah, I don't, I know that fans out there are going to be, oh, it's Toledo. Why are you scoring 77 points? Like, these guys are on scholarship at Ohio State playing against guys that are on scholarship at Toledo. You have to take a full advantage of your reps. And I don't appreciate personally when I'm a competitive person. If I'm in a game and someone's beating my ass, beat my ass till the game is over. Like, you've earned it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need you to coddle me or to try to consider my feelings. Like, I don't think you're actually helping the Rockets team by being nice. And I don't think you're helping your own players by not going out there and running the full offense, because that is the opportunity for those guys to make the most of their moment so they can be better in the future. You think about a guy like TC Caffey. Again, we could talk about this offense all night, but like, TC Caffey is a walk-on player at Ohio State. Like, you don't know what that run that he had in that game does for him in the future, not just with NIL in the immediate sense, but potential scholarship down the road to Ohio State or somewhere else. We're in a new era. Walk-ons are not 3, 2, 1. Walk-ons are not going to be stuck in a situation where they can't go anywhere. Like, if you go out and put up some big numbers and show out, all of a sudden that changes your whole life. So I just think that it's better to go out there and run the offense.
TC Caffey should be a scholarship running back in the MAC already, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly good enough to be there. So we could talk about offense. We got a lot more stuff all week on the podcast to talk about offense. Let's run to the defense, because upon rewatching it, I mean, it was three plays or 4 plays really in this game that Toledo broke. There was 2 23-yard runs by Daquan Finn and 2 just broken plays on not even a broken play. The first touchdown of the day, Cam Brown just got beat. He let a guy go. And I don't know. We'll have to talk to the coaches about it, but do you expect that there was supposed to be safety help there? Because it doesn't seem like Cam would normally let that go. And I figure you have 2 new safeties back there. Maybe it was a miscommunication.
Yeah. The way I saw that play was, I think it might have been dropping in the cover 3, and Cam sort of had outside leverage, and it was an in-breaking route from his guy on that side, and there was a dig underneath it that Lathan Ransom, who I think was supposed to be the deep safety on play, jumped the underneath dig route and just left that back corner of the defense completely vacated, and there was no corner playing the deep third on that side either, so it was a completely unmanned area of the field, and the Toledo receiver, give him credit, he beat Cam Brown in a foot race to that spot, but I don't think Cam Brown had much of a chance to stay with him with the defense that was called there. So that was a little bit of a breakdown. And then the one against Denzel Burke was just a guy lost one-on-one. You want to see him make a better play on the ball, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not even that concerned about the guy catching the ball. I'm concerned about the fact that he caught it and didn't get tackled.
Yeah, right.
To me, that's a much bigger concern, because even on the 23-yard touchdown run by Daquan Finn, that was Denzel Burke chasing his guy across the field. And when he saw Finn break free towards the corner, towards the pylon, it looked like it took 7 or 8 people to turn Denzel Burke around to go get him. And I don't know if that's a situation where it's 28-7. We're not going as hard as we can. I don't know if it's the new turf and people aren't feeling comfortable, slamming on the brakes, because we again did see a lot of guys slipping. And I did ask players about it after the game, and they said, yeah, it's a little slick right now on the new rubber field. But it's certainly, Denzel Burke struggled pretty bad against Arkansas State. I don't think he was as bad in this game, but it's clear that the tape is out there now because teams are going at him. And again, if there has to be a weak spot on every part of the team. So if he's the weak spot right now, he better bow up, because he's going to keep getting tested.
Yeah, and he doesn't have much of a safety net if Jordan Hancock's not available. I don't know. J.K. Johnson played a decent amount again, but I don't know if I've seen much from him that says he should be playing more. I think he's been okay, but
but isn't that what you want though at corner? You're not hearing his name, and he's not giving up plays. So that?
Yeah, probably. That's probably fair. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I had any concerns about him in coverage at any point, and I guess I can't think of any. So, yeah, maybe I think that's probably the right way to view it. I think he might have had like a missed tackle or two that weren't great, but honestly, all the corners have. That position in particular is not tackling very well at the moment. They had too many missed tackles in this game. They had PFF had them for 12. It honestly felt like they had 20. Rewatching it, and almost all of them were trying to bring Daquan Finn to the ground.
Yeah,
And
how many of them were in the backfield? That guy was incredible.
He's he's really good. So I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but I thought by and large Ohio State's defensive linemen were like pretty undisciplined in their rush lanes and allowed him to get out like way too much. Even on the first touchdown pass that we were talking about, like Jack Sawyer just got way upfield and Daquan Finn just kind of stood up and then scrambled out to his right and threw the bomb. There was, I think, maybe the 23-yard run that wasn't a touchdown. I think a similar thing happened where both ends just got way up the field, and
both
like
of them
that's it's like a guy like that. You don't give him a middle lane to just run through, and you put some of that on Jim Knowles too. Like the touchdown. I get the touchdown on the other 23-yard run confused, but on one of the 23-yard runs, they blitzed from from outside the tackle, and Daquan Finn just jumped up and ran into the vacated space, and it was easy for him. They had spies, and the spies didn't do their job on those plays. They missed tackles as well, but I thought the plan to contain him could have been a little better because there wasn't really the first play of the game, or maybe the second play of the game, was a designed quarterback run that got out for a nice game. But then after that, it was all scrambles. Yeah. So it just felt like they didn't really bother to try to contain him much on those plays, which is kind of puzzling.
I don't know if that is technique being taught with Jack and JT Tuimoloau, like Zach Harrison, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, they all did it multiple times on Saturday, where they just simply outran the quarterback, and like the quarterback was the other direction. So at some point you just have to either stop running outside and just beeline straight for him or what, because it seemed like they put themselves in a position. And I get it, again, not to take anything away from Daquan Finn. He's a super athletic kid. And a lot of times, no matter where they run into him on the field, if it's one-on-one, he's going to win that battle against defensive linemen. But no, I think that's just what we talked about on Saturday night, is that you run the risk of giving up some of those break plays because you're being so aggressive. And it's easy to be super aggressive when you're up by 56 points. But there has to be a moment where someone, and I don't know if this is a situation where the linebackers have to do something different. I mean, I'm not entirely sure of if it's just Toledo taking advantage of the fact that the linebackers vacated some space and then all of a sudden you can step up. But overall, it was like 4 plays that Toledo broke that got all 21 of their points. And that's the way it is.
Yeah, I think Jim Knowles' thing is if they have 5 or fewer of those plays, then he actually thinks that's okay. And they had more than 5 in the game, but I think they had less than 5 when the starters were actually out there and the game was like still in the balance. So I think we'll talk to him on Tuesday because we didn't talk to him after the game on Saturday. I'd be kind of curious to see how he comes out of that game, because it wasn't even like bend but don't break. It was just like you said, it was 4 bad plays and they got 21 points out of it. So it's kind of hard to evaluate, honestly, because it was such a weird and sort of lopsided game. If those big plays were more of a result of like structural inefficiencies in the defense that people were noticing, then that'd be one thing. But I don't think that was it. I think it was just maybe a matter of being over aggressive against the quarterback who's capable of beating you when you do that. So I don't come out of it like super alarmed. My biggest thing with the defense is like, can they stop other teams from running the ball? And when I say that, I mean like with their halfbacks and like traditional run game kind of stuff. And they were still good at that against Toledo. They've been good at that in all 3 games. They're going to have to be good at it against Wisconsin this Saturday. So, and until they start showing some dents that way, I'm not terribly worried about it. And as I said before the beginning of the season, and I think you've said, and Austin has said multiple times, like there's a trade-off with this defense. The big plays are going to come. They're going to be frustrating at times, but I think that the defense will be in a better place overall if they are erring on the side of aggression and those things happen, because I think they're going to have more splash plays for themselves than the other teams are going to have against them.
Yeah, I don't have what I would consider like wholesale concerns. I actually was encouraged by the way that Tyleik Williams played on Saturday night. I thought that was his best game since his 2 sack performance against Penn State last year. I thought he played really well, and was making plays in the run game and in the pass rush area. And beyond that, I think the biggest concern I have is just if that's what the defense does against a quarterback that can move like that, and as we talked about on snap judgments on Saturday night, you're not going to see that again until J.J. McCarthy and Michigan come into Ohio Stadium at the end of November. I guess, how do you prepare for that sort of elusivity from a quarterback? Because J.J. McCarthy is really, really good, and that has to be something that you look ahead to. Maybe the field will be less slippery then. Maybe it'll be frozen. I don't know. But the Buckeyes are going to have to figure out how to combine that aggressiveness with some form of discipline when they're chasing the quarterback, because Michigan has much better athletes on the outside and at running back than Toledo does to help complement that play. So that style of play. So that's a concern to me. Any other thoughts on the defense for you that as you watched or things that, stood out to you?
No, I'm glad you mentioned Tyleek because I had his name down here too. I think the biggest thing is just missed tackles. Like they had 10 against Notre Dame, they had 12 against Toledo. I think they only were credited with 6 against Arkansas State, but I feel like all 6 were like kind of backbreakers for them when they happened. So that when you're as aggressive as Jim Knowles wants to be, and the result of that is you're putting guys in space sometimes alone where they got to make those plays, then the guys got to make those plays. And I will say, like, Cam Martinez maybe didn't do a great job of that last week, but then there was a play against Toledo where like he got into the flat one-on-one when Toledo was backed up, and like he didn't bring the guy down, but like he hit him, he stopped him in his tracks, and then Tyleek Williams came over and kind of cleaned up the play for him. Like that's the kind of stuff they need more of. So tackling in space, I just think is the thing that they really need to focus on here for the next couple of weeks.
My last thought on this game, and it's really not on this game, it's more for the future of this defense, and I hinted at it a little bit on snap judgments, but when you see 2 starting safeties not play in this game, and the replacements for this weekend were obvious, you slide in Lathan Ransom and Cam Martinez because those are guys that are essentially playing as co-starters anyway right now. Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty clear to me that Court Williams has to play linebacker down the road, because there is no way that if Cam Martinez continues on his ascension and gets more reps and gets more comfortable with his athleticism, with his ability to do multiple things and play multiple spots, with what we saw out of Sonny Styles and Kai Stokes, I just don't know how those guys aren't going to be on the field a whole heck of a lot together over the next 2 years after this one. And I think Court Williams has to be able to adapt and play. I don't see him having the ability to cover guys down the field the same way that Kai and Sonny and Cam do. And I don't want to see a player like that, who's a really talented player and a team leader and a great representative of everything that Ohio State is about, being relegated to playing in the last 5 minutes against Toledo when it's 77-21. Like he is a game changing type player in the right spot. And I don't know that safety is going to be it. And I hope that Court sees that and is understanding it, because I think that's the best way for him to get on the field, because you want people like him to succeed in the program.
I'd like to know how much of that conversation has happened with him, because I feel the same way. I thought that coming into the year, I just kind of assessed the picture at safety, but also too assessed how Court looked like last year in the Rose Bowl when he was effectively playing linebacker. He looked great, like being sort of in the mess, diagnosing plays, being comfortable up on the line of scrimmage, getting off of blocks. Like even if he were to play safety, he'd be a walk down safety. He was doing that stuff all the time anyway. And maybe he's eager to show that he can do all that safety encompasses. And if he wants to do that, then I'm not going to be the one to tell him he shouldn't try it. But in this defense with the personnel they have right now, it seems like he could help them at linebacker if he wanted to play there.
Especially help him in the future, because if you look at Taraja Mitchell will be gone. Cody Simon could be, he's in his 4th year. Tommy Eichenberg's in his 4th year. Steel Chambers is in his 4th year. Paulie Agneo Teote is gone after this year. You have Chip Trainum, but maybe he's a guy that, is, I don't know that he's a full-time starter at linebacker. I think that a player like Cord, as smart as he is, as physical as he can be, I think that that's the only real way he can make an impact on this team for the long term. And again, I mean, it's 3 games into this season and you don't want to spend too much time thinking down the road, but that is a player that is not likely to see a lot more playing time this year. And so maybe it's either in his best interest to start transitioning into that linebacker role now, because that's where I think he fits.
Yeah, well, we thought he'd have a big role against Notre Dame, right? Based on everything they said about him, because they play
because he's such a great kid. He's a leader. I mean, he's a captain on the team. Like, it's so weird. This entire team, you have all these captains, and you're like, oh, well, is he going to play? It's weird.
It was odd seeing him out there next to Sonny and Kai. Like, and no offense, but it's garbage time. Like he's out there with young guys, like trying to get meaningful reps, and it's like he's a captain, and he's in his 3rd year. Like it's not. I think it's more of a reflection of the other talent at the position, and not that he's not good enough, but it's just crowded. And I think he could help himself and help Ohio State if he would entertain the thought of playing linebacker.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have anything else. I have talked myself to death here. William, anything else for you, Mr. Landis?
No. Are we going to do flashy freshman? You want to do flashy freshman real quick?
I mean, I just did.
Yeah,
certainly did about Sonny and Kai, but I mean, I think that Tegra Shabola, man, I know that you're probably watching him. He actually, he's moving some dudes and looks like that sort. You know who he looks like to me is like an SEC offensive lineman all of a sudden. He looked pretty good.
Yeah, he was one that I wanted to mention, and then another one too that like is a weird one that people might not think of, but he was Ohio State Special Teams Player of the Week. Jayden Fielding, just like booting the ball out of the end zone. That's what they want. They've been looking for that for like a decade, for somebody who can regularly kick the ball out of the end zone, and he's doing it.
As long as he can keep it in bounds, that's the job. And obviously, Dallin Hayden. I mean, we haven't talked about him, but he certainly is surprising, I think, to people right now with just not that he's a good running back. He was a 4-star tailback, Mr. Football in Tennessee. I mean, he's a really good player. Father played in the NFL. Brothers are both Division I college football players. Like, he's going to be a kid that understands football, but the physicality with which he's running and the ability to see a hole and get through it quickly, I think is really a little bit more mature for his age than I anticipated on the field.
He has more suddenness than I thought he would. I envisioned more of like a stiffer kind of Master T kind of back, and he is not that. So, that was a little bit of a surprise to me as well, but a pleasant one. I think he can help them right now. Like if they wanted to, I don't think they should have a 3-headed rushing attack, but if they wanted to, I think Dallin Hayden could handle it.
Well, I mean, the reality is he may not be a part of a 3-man running attack. He could be needed as the number 2 next week against Wisconsin if the injury to Trayvon Henderson is anything that warrants an extended rest or even a short rest. So I will have a lot more to talk about with that throughout the week, as we're wont to do on the podcast. We'll be at Roosters on Olentangy River Road on Monday at 11:30 a.m. If you want to come out there and watch the show there, enjoy some delicious Roosters food. Tuesday, we've got Ryan Day, Jim Knowles, CJ Stroud, I assume, at Woody Hayes Athletic Center for their Tuesday press conference. That'll start right about noon o'clock on Tuesday. And, Bill Landis, myself, Austin Ward will be continuing to try to cover Ohio State as well as we can here on the podcast. And you can also find us over at ohiostate.rivals.com and join us there if you want to keep the conversation going. So we'll stop it here today for this edition of the Podcast Daily. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. That's Bill Landis. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.